Humphrey Nzeyi is a Ugandan businessman, and he does also sit on the board of the Uganda Manufacturers Association, as well as the Private Sector Foundation Uganda PSFU board, where he serves as the chairman for the manufacturing sector. Now, we know manufacturing is also one of the other sectors that the president continuously has said, even during the lockdown, should remain open. We've had aspects and talk about the BUBU policy and the local content policy as well, which Dr. Fred Muhumuza earlier on while speaking actually did talk about how do we deal with the local content law. But to you, Humphrey, let's start off with the extent to which the budget has addressed the COVID-19 pandemic implications on life, on business, and job creation in the productive sectors. And here we're looking at manufacturing itself, there is agriculture, but there is also mining and ICT.
Thank you very much, Mildred, and thank you to our Honourable Minister of Finance, our Chair, Dr. Eli Karahanga, our Vice Chair, all the members of PSFU, and all our listeners today. Thank you very much for giving us this time. Well, when we look at this budget, we have to look at it against the backdrop of when it was written. This budget was written earlier on this year and delivered in early June. And straight after that, we entered into a lockdown. So at the time of its conception, the economy was on a trajectory of recovery. Since then, many things have happened. Yes, we've gone back into lockdown, and there's a need to readdress this budget. And this is what this dialogue is all about. As we look at this year's budget, which was themed industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation, we as manufacturers first thank government for focusing on industrialization in this year's budget, focusing on value addition and on industry as a whole. Now, when you take a closer look at the budget, there are some key wins for industry in the budget. First off, government pledged to construct industrial parks across the country. Now, these industrial parks will aid business. As Dr. Muhumuza said, people will be given land to set up their industries. So this is exciting for manufacturers and for industry as a whole. Government also pledged to support local manufacturers to increase the capacity to produce medical and pharmaceutical products for the local markets. This is a very important step. As we've seen globally, there's been a shortage of supplies for a lot of medical items, and to aid production of that here in Uganda is a great step. Recapitalization of UDB by 103 million. This is outstanding. Last year, we had access to 555 billion. An additional 103 billion is coming in this year. So this is support to industry that is much needed, and it's something that we really thank government for. Government have also committed to developing 7 skills development institutions. Now, technical institutions, what we've seen is with technical jobs, people get employed faster. With technical skills, people get employed faster. So this is a very important area, and a very important area for job creation. Government also pledged to support the existing sugar factories to produce industrial sugar. This is huge investment for the sugar industries, and industrial sugar is a large area of import substitution that we can attack. They've also pledged to enhance the capacity of UNBS and NDA to perform quality assurance and conformity of standards. This is important for industry because it stops fake goods in the market. We stop competing with fake goods, and that's a very important, that steals so much of our market. Government have also pledged to help enforce laws on counterfeits. This is something that needs to be arrested. Our market again is being stolen by counterfeits. They've also pledged to enforce the laws on local content. Local content, like Francis said earlier on, we as private sector, we want to accomplish and achieve about 40% of government procurement from local entities. We have oil coming, and local content is going to play a much, much bigger role in that sector. $20 billion of investment is coming into the country. If we can have local content as part of that, then you will see a lot of that money retained in this country. And then also, we applaud government for the recent announcement of tax holidays for local investors. A lot of times, local investors are overlooked, and we thank His Excellency that this time there is a provision for local investors. So those are the key wins for industry in this year's budget. However, there are also areas where we could have had better interventions by government. Yes, there are areas which we suggested, and we really should have seen better involvement from government. Key amongst those is digital tax stamps. I know Francis mentioned this earlier on. Digital tax stamps is an issue that has been long running with government. We don't, as manufacturers and as industry, we're not against the concept of digital tax stamps. However, the cost of the stamp, we feel, should be borne by government. Manufacturers have engaged His Excellency on this issue, and we're waiting for implementation. But there needs to be deeper dialogue with government on the implementation of digital tax stamps. And in this budget, we see them rolling out to cement and sugar. And we feel that that's something that needs to be addressed before we roll out to these new sectors. The budget, of course, having been drawn up before the second lockdown, it didn't address a lot of issues, and it didn't build in any safeguards for livelihoods. So we need to relook at how we build in safeguards for livelihoods, how we build in safeguards for business continuity. That's something that we need to look at. Power tariffs, on a positive note, power tariffs have been subsidized for large industries. However, we need now these subsidies to trickle down to small and medium enterprises. Low cost of power will increase production, lower the cost of production for our small manufacturers, and that makes us more competitive in the market. Despite central bank lowering their CBR rate to 6.5% recently, the cost of finance still remains prohibitive. In commercial banks, cost of finance, prime rates still hover around 17.5%, 18%, and we find that we're only able to access finance at around 20%. So this is something that needs to be addressed. Government have done the right steps, but we feel there needs to be a dialogue with the banking sector. If they can access finance at 6.5%, they should also pass on a lot of that benefit to consumers. Recently, government also raised an excise duty on the budget for plastics of 2.5%. Now, we don't feel this was well thought out because it has far-reaching effects. When we look at things like packaging for exports, that excise duty increases the cost of our exports. When we look at plastics for sanitary ware, for pipes, sanitary pipes, this doesn't. We need to have better thinking around this particular. Internet has to be viewed as a tool to enable business. In these lockdowns, we have an environment where people are working from home, students are online, so this is prohibitive. Whereas one could access internet before in the offices are now only 10% occupancy, so people have to have internet at their homes in order for them to work at home. So these are areas that we feel that government should have addressed. So since this new budget, many things have happened, and there's a need to realign expectations and tailor the budget to meet the current needs of the nation, while also holding on to the long-term goals of the nation. Already, government is talking of reallocating resources to spur growth, and we thank His Excellency for this move. Now, when we look at what needs to be done to reallocate resources, we need to look at what happened in the last lockdown and its effects on the economy. Last year, the economy grew by 3%, and if you put this against a backdrop of our population growth of 3.2% every year, that growth is not enough to accommodate the increase in population. During the lockdowns, what we also saw in the private sector is that among the micro, small, medium sized enterprises, only 10% of them were able to work during the lockdown. So that's a very small number of quite a significant part of our economy. So we need to address that. In the job market, we have a situation where 6.5% of people were retrenched and have not gotten their jobs back up to now. So we need to address the issue of job creation and job retention, more importantly. On the positive side, like the Honourable Minister of Finance said, government through the banks was able to allow a restructure of $7.3 trillion shillings of loans. And if you look at this amount, 7.3 trillion shillings, this equated to 43% of all commercial loans out there. So that we thank government for that, and that has really helped us to stay in business. UDB also, as I said before, was allocated 555 billion and a further 103 billion. As manufacturers and industry would like to see this amount increased in order to help us. So what we need to do now when we're re-looking at this budget is to start providing solutions for livelihoods to continue and support for businesses to continue. Thank you very much, Mildred.
You're definitely still with us. You talked about local content, and this also was highlighted by Dr. Frederick Muhumuza. There is the Buy Uganda, Build Uganda policy, and he was also talking about government completing the local content policy. Do you think this is the solution to building a resilient economy? And if so, why? And also, how do we need to deal with this entire idea of the local content policy? How better can we do it if we are thinking in the direction of building a resilient economy?
Thank you very much, Mildred. Absolutely, I agree with you. Local content is central to building this economy and creating resilience amongst this economy. During these lockdowns, what we've seen is, imports have been difficult to get into the country. Manufacturing, a lot of supplies have been interrupted. The cost of freight coming into the country has been increased. So when we look at local content, we're trying to say to government that if we start off with government procurement, if at least 40% of government procurement can be sourced locally, yes, there's a lot of benefit for the country. A lot of that income and generated stays within the economy rather than having capital flight. We still have large infrastructure projects that are going on in this country where a lot of the raw materials are brought in completely by the contractors, and we're getting little or no benefit to this economy. Now, when you also look at this big animal called oil. Oil is going to bring over $20 billion of investment in the next 5 years into this economy. If we don't look at local content, we will lose out on two things. We'll lose out on retention of some of that 20 billion inside content. We're also developing our people by participating properly in these things. So there is a lot. Our target as private sector is to reach 40% local content. And, we have the laws, but we need enforcement. We need government to enforce these laws. As Francis said earlier on, some of our neighbors are accomplishing this. So it is something that is possible. It is something that we can achieve. And it's something that we're pushing government to take seriously and to put at the forefront of what they're doing. Thank you.
A later stage. I will be speaking to Dr. Ian Clark in just a minute, who will be highlighting particularly the aspect of the healthcare system. Now, we know that in the recent weeks, we've been talking about the hiked prices, particularly with regard to the private healthcare facilities. And it is very clear, while the government is paying attention to wealth creation, you can blow up that wealth in just trying to fight for your life. And if there are exorbitant prices and charges with the private healthcare facilities, then how can we be able to balance between, creating wealth and retaining this wealth with a healthy economy and population as well. Now, Dr. Ian Clark is the chairman of the Uganda Healthcare Federation, and he is also the founder of the Chiwoko Hospital, Wero District, and a lifetime board member. Dr. Ian Clark, it's a pleasure having you on the discussion. Now, what options could actually be available